April 7, 1945, East China Sea, 200 miles north of Okinawa. The pen trembled slightly as Inan Mitsuru Yoshida wrote in his private journal, recording words that would have earned him severe punishment if discovered by the ship's senior officers. "This cannot be what the admirals promised us. No battleship, however mighty, can survive what approaches from the horizon." Through the radar scope, he had just witnessed something that contradicted everything the Imperial Japanese Navy had taught him about the invincibility of the super battleship Yamato. Hundreds of aircraft signatures bloomed across his screen like deadly flowers, approaching from multiple directions at speeds his ship could never hope to evade. The heaviest battleship ever constructed, displacing nearly 72,000 tons at full load and bristling with the most powerful naval guns ever mounted on a warship, was about to face an enemy it could not fight. In Japanese naval planning rooms, the battleship represented ultimate power. Yet here, in the open waters of the East China Sea, a new reality was about to write the final chapter of the battleship era. 3,332 men stood on the decks and within the compartments of Yamato that morning. None of them knew they were sailing on history's last great battleship sortie, a desperate gamble that would end not in glorious surface combat, but in a one-sided aerial massacre. The mathematics of this battle were not about armor thickness or shell weight. They were about a simple equation that Japanese admirals refused to accept. One battleship, however powerful, could not defeat nearly 400 aircraft operating in coordinated waves with complete air superiority. The transformation from confidence to catastrophe would take less than 2 hours. The collapse had begun years earlier in the design rooms of the Kure Naval Arsenal. Between 1934 and 1937, Japanese naval architects had pursued an obsession. If they could not match American numerical superiority in warships, they would build individual vessels so powerful that one Japanese battleship could defeat 2 or even 3 American ones. Captain Kikuo Fujioto, the brilliant and controversial designer who conceived the Yamato class, pitched his vision to the Naval General Staff in March 1934. A battleship displacing 70,000 tons at full load, armed with 918.1 in guns, protected by armor up to 16 in thick on the belt. The specifications defied international naval treaties and exceeded anything any nation had attempted. Construction began in November 1937 at the Kure Naval Arsenal under extreme secrecy. Workers signed non-disclosure agreements under penalty of imprisonment. Neighborhoods near the shipyard had their windows boarded over. Palm trees and tall barriers were erected around the construction site. When Yamato's sister ship Musashi was launched from Nagasaki in November 1940, the city was placed under air raid alert, forcing all residents indoors so no civilian eyes could witness the vessel. The deception worked. American naval intelligence did not learn the true specifications of the Yamato class until after the war ended. Yamato was commissioned on December 16, 1941, just 9 days after Pearl Harbor. She measured 263 m in length with a beam of 38.9 m. Her displacement of nearly 72,000 tons fully loaded made her the heaviest battleship ever constructed. Her main armament of 9 Type 94 naval guns firing 18.1 inch shells represented the pinnacle of naval artillery. Each gun barrel was 21.13 m long and weighed 147.3 metric tons. The guns could fire a 1,460 kilograms armor-piercing shell to a range of 42 kilometers. A single salvo from Yamato's 9 main guns hurled more than 13,000 kilograms of steel toward the enemy. The armor protection was unprecedented. The main belt was 16.1 in thick, angled at 20 degrees to maximize effectiveness. The main deck armor ranged from 7.9 in over the machinery spaces to 9 in over the magazines. The faceplates of the main gun turrets were 25.66 in thick, the heaviest armor ever fitted to a warship. Below the waterline, Yamato incorporated an elaborate torpedo defense system consisting of multiple longitudinal bulkheads, creating compartments that could be flooded or kept empty to absorb torpedo explosions. The system was designed to withstand 3 torpedo hits on the same side without catastrophic effect. This claim would be tested on April 7. The secondary armament initially consisted of 12 155mm guns in 4 triple turrets and 127mm dual-purpose guns in 6 twin mounts. For anti-aircraft defense, Yamato initially carried only 24 25mm guns, a pathetically inadequate number that reflected the Imperial Japanese Navy's fatal underestimation of air power. This oversight would prove catastrophic. Yamato's propulsion system consisted of 12 con boilers driving 4 steam turbines, generating 150,000 shaft horsepower. This immense power plant pushed the massive hull to a maximum speed of 27.4 knots during sea trials. Remarkably fast for such a heavy vessel. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet and planner of the Pearl Harbor attack, chose Yamato as his flagship on February 12, 1942. Yamamoto understood naval aviation better than almost any officer in the Imperial Japanese Navy. He had opposed the construction of the Yamato class, arguing that the resources would be better spent on aircraft carriers. Yet even Yamamoto could not resist the prestige of commanding from the most powerful battleship afloat. Yamato's first combat deployment came in May 1942 during the Battle of Midway. Yamamoto embarked aboard the battleship with the main battle force, positioning his fleet 300 behind the carrier striking force. The battle plan called for the carriers to attack Midway Island and lure the American carrier fleet into range of Yamamoto's battleships. The plan collapsed spectacularly. American carrier aircraft found and destroyed 4 Japanese fleet carriers in a single day. Yamato never fired a shot. She turned back toward Japan without engaging any American forces. This pattern would repeat throughout Yamato's career. Despite mounting guns that could destroy any ship afloat from ranges where the enemy could not reply, Yamato would spend most of the war hiding in anchorages. Her fuel too precious to waste, her value too great to risk in combat where American air power dominated. Between July 1942 and June 1944, Yamato spent months at Truk Lagoon in the Caroline Islands, serving primarily as a flagship and accommodation ship. Crew members gave lectures, conducted drills, and waited for a battle that never came. By late 1943, as American forces began their island hopping campaign across the Central Pacific, the strategic situation for Japan had deteriorated catastrophically. The Imperial Japanese Navy had lost dozens of destroyers, cruisers, and carriers in the Solomon Islands campaign and the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Fuel shortages were becoming critical as American submarines strangled Japanese oil shipments from the Dutch East Indies. Yamato returned to Japan in December 1943 for modifications. Workers removed 2 of the 4 triple 155mm secondary turrets and replaced them with additional anti-aircraft weapons. The light anti-aircraft armament was increased from 24 to 5,225mm guns. Radar systems were installed. When Yamato emerged from the Kure Naval Arsenal in March 1944, she was a more balanced warship, but the strategic window for battleship dominance had closed forever. The first and only time Yamato's main guns fired at enemy warships came in October 1944 during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Vice Admiral Teo Kurita would lead a surface striking force including Yamato and a sister ship Musashi through the San Bernardino Strait to attack American landing forces at Leyte. On October 24, during the Battle of the Sibuyan Sea, American carrier aircraft subjected Musashi to wave after wave of attacks. Over 4 hours, the battleship absorbed an estimated 17 bomb hits and 19 torpedo hits before capsizing and sinking with a loss of over 1,000 crew members. Yamato witnessed her sister ship's destruction from 30 m away. The lesson was clear and terrible. No amount of armor could protect a battleship from massed air attack. At 6:57 on the morning of October 25, 1944, Yamato opened fire on American ships for the first and only time in her career. The range was 35,000 yards. 6 American escort carriers with minimal escorts lay directly ahead. These were the ships of Taffy III, providing air support for ground forces on Leyte. For nearly 2 hours, Yamato pursued the American ships, firing salvo after salvo. She scored hits on the escort carrier USS White Plains, a shell that exploded just beneath the keel, causing severe damage. She contributed to the sinking of the escort carrier USS Gambier Bay and the destroyers USS Johnston and USS Hell. Yet even in this moment of apparent triumph, the limitations of battleship warfare became apparent. The American destroyers charged directly at the Japanese battleships in what should have been suicidal attacks. Their desperate courage worked. Kurita, fearing submarine attacks and believing he was engaging fleet carriers rather than escort carriers, ordered a general retreat just as his battleships were on the verge of reaching the American landing beaches. As Yamato withdrew from the battle, American carrier aircraft from the main fleet caught up with the Japanese force. Bombs damaged Yamato's weather deck and killed several crew members. By late 1944, Japan's strategic position had become hopeless. American forces controlled the Central Pacific, were liberating the Philippines, and were preparing to assault islands within bombing range of the Japanese home islands. The Imperial Japanese Navy's combined fleet had been effectively destroyed. Yamato returned to Japan in November 1944 and entered dry dock at Kure for repairs. On November 25, while transiting the East China Sea, Yamato's battle group was attacked by the American submarine USS Ceylon. The submarine sank the battleship Congo and a destroyer. Yamato escaped undamaged. The repairs and anti-aircraft upgrades at Kure consumed the final months of 1944. Workers installed additional 25mm anti-aircraft guns, bringing the total to 162. They added more radar systems and improved damage control equipment. When Yamato left dry dock on January 3, 1945, she was as ready as any battleship could be for the air-dominated warfare of the modern Pacific. But readiness was irrelevant. There was no longer any fuel for operations, no air cover for sorties, and no strategic purpose for battleships in a war that had moved beyond them. Captain Kosaku Aruga took command of Yamato on November 25, 1944. He was a veteran officer with extensive experience in cruiser and battleship operations. March 1945 brought American forces to Okinawa. The island lay only 350 miles south of the Japanese home island of Kyushu. Its capture would provide American forces with airfields and anchorages for the invasion of Japan itself. On March 19, American carrier aircraft from Task Force 58 struck the Kure naval base in a massive raid. Over 300 aircraft attacked Japanese warships at anchor. Yamato was hit by one bomb on her bridge structure and suffered damage from near misses. 5 crew members were killed and several dozen wounded. American forces invaded Okinawa on April 1, 1945. The landings were virtually unopposed as Japanese forces withdrew to prepare defensive positions in the island's rugged interior. During a conference in Tokyo in March 1945, Emperor Hirohito was briefed on plans for Okinawa's defense. The army explained extensive preparations for ground defense and massive kamikaze air attacks. The emperor reportedly asked a question that would seal Yamato's fate. But what about the Navy? What are they doing to assist in defending Okinawa? Have we no more ships? The Navy's senior leadership, already humiliated by years of defeat and their inability to prevent American forces from approaching the home islands, felt compelled to demonstrate that the Navy still existed, still had fighting spirit. Admiral Tsutoyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, ordered his staff to develop an operation using the Navy's few remaining surface ships. The resulting plan was called Tango, Heaven No. 1. Yamato, the light cruiser Yahagi, and 8 destroyers would sortie from the inland sea, transit through the East China Sea, and attack American forces at Okinawa. The ships would fight their way through American naval defenses, beach themselves on Okinawa shores, and use their guns as a mobile coastal artillery until destroyed. Any surviving crew would go ashore to fight alongside the army garrison until killed. The plan was presented to Vice Admiral Seishi Ito, commander of the Second Fleet, on April 5. Ito's reaction was reportedly furious. He called the operation a meaningless sacrifice of ships and men that would accomplish nothing except propaganda value. He pointed out the obvious flaws. The force would have no air cover beyond the first few hours. American submarines and reconnaissance aircraft would detect the sortie immediately. American carrier task forces would intercept long before the Japanese ships reached Okinawa. The force lacked sufficient fuel even to return to Japan. Ito refused to order the operation initially. The argument continued into the night of April 5. Staff officers from Tokyo explained that the order came from the highest levels. Ito eventually relented, though he reportedly said the operation was a waste that would achieve nothing except adding to the casualty lists. At 1,600 hours on April 6, Yamato departed the Tokoyama oil depot for the last time. The battleship had been given fuel for a one-way trip to Okinawa. Yahagi and 8 destroyers accompanied Yamato. The total force comprised approximately 3,000 Japanese sailors. Before departure, crews were assembled and informed of the mission's nature. Any man could request to remain behind without shame. None did. Approximately 67 junior officer candidates and some sick or injured crew members were ordered off the ships to preserve trained personnel. The force passed through the Bungo Strait between Kyushu and Shikoku shortly after midnight on April 7. American submarines USS Threadfin and USS Hackleback were waiting, positioned based on intelligence intercepts that had revealed Operation Tengo's details days before execution. The submarines tracked the Japanese force throughout the night, transmitting regular position reports. The Japanese detected the submarines and knew they were being followed, but could do nothing to prevent it. As dawn broke on April 7, the Japanese force passed the Osumi Peninsula and entered the open waters of the East China Sea. They formed a defensive circle with Yahagi in the lead, Yamato in the center, and the 8 destroyers arrayed in a ring with 1,500 m between each ship. Speed was increased to 20 knots. At 0600, 6 Mitsubishi A6M fighters arrived to provide combat air patrol. This token force represented the entirety of Japanese air cover. The pilots had been told to remain until 1,000 hours, then return to base. After that, Yamato would face American air power alone. The morning was overcast with low clouds at 3,000 feet and intermittent rain squalls. Visibility varied from excellent to nearly zero. American reconnaissance aircraft first detected the Japanese force at 0823. An F-6F Hellcat from the carrier USS Essex spotted Yamato's unmistakable silhouette through a break in the clouds. The pilot transmitted a contact report that was received by Task Force 58 within minutes. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commanded Task Force 58 from his flagship, the carrier USS Bunker Hill. Task Force 58 consisted of 16 aircraft carriers, 8 fast battleships, 15 cruisers, and over 60 destroyers with a total air complement exceeding 1,000 aircraft. Maida had been expecting Yamato. American intelligence had intercepted and decoded Japanese communications regarding Operation Tengo. Upon receiving confirmation that Yamato was at sea, Maida immediately began preparing a massive airstrike. Admiral Raymond Spruant, commander of the Fifth Fleet, initially ordered his battleship force under Rear Admiral Morton Dio to intercept Yamato. 6 modern battleships, including USS Missouri and USS Wisconsin, began positioning to meet the Japanese force in a surface action. Maida preempted the battleship engagement by launching his aircraft without waiting for Spruant's approval. He understood that carrier aircraft could destroy Yamato more efficiently and with less risk than a surface engagement. Spruant accepted Mitch's decision. Task Groups 58.1 and 58.3 began launching aircraft at 1,000 hours. The carriers USS Hornet, USS Bennington, USS Belleau Wood, USS San Jacinto, USS Essex, USS Bunker Hill, USS Hancock, and USS Bataan launched a total of 280 aircraft in the first wave. The strike force consisted of 132 F-6F Hellcat and F-4U Corsair fighters, 50 SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, and 98 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. 53 aircraft from USS Hancock launched 15 minutes late and failed to find the Japanese force in the poor weather, reducing the first wave to 227 aircraft. Task Group 58.44 launched a second wave of 110 aircraft 45 minutes after the first wave. This included aircraft from USS Yorktown, USS Intrepid, and USS Langley. In total, approximately 386 American aircraft were committed to the attack, though only about 280 actually engaged the Japanese force due to navigation difficulties in poor weather. Each Avenger carried a Mark 13 torpedo with a 600 pounds Torpex warhead. Each Helldiver carried either 1,000 pounds armor-piercing bombs or 1,000 pounds general-purpose bombs, plus two 250 pounds bombs. The fighters carried bombs or rockets in addition to their machine guns and cannon. At 10:14, Yamato's air search radar detected the first American reconnaissance aircraft. The 6 Japanese Zero fighters attempted to intercept, but were hopelessly outnumbered. They managed to shoot down no American aircraft before withdrawing at 1,000 hours as ordered. After 1,000 hours, Yamato and her escorts faced the American strike force alone. At 1,100 hours, American aircraft began circling the Japanese force just outside anti-aircraft range. Pilots from different carriers coordinated their attacks, organizing into strike groups targeted on specific ships. The coordination was methodical and professional, demonstrating the vast experience American naval aviators had accumulated over 3 years of Pacific combat. At 12:32, lookouts aboard Yamato sighted the first incoming strike. Captain Ha aboard Yahagi later described the sight as terrifying. Large formations of aircraft circled the task force in clockwise and counterclockwise rotations like wolves circling prey. At 12:34, Yamato opened fire with her forward main battery turrets. The battleship was firing special sand Shikoden shells, anti-aircraft munitions that used a time fuse to create a shotgun blast of steel fragments. Firing 18 inches naval guns at aircraft was an act of desperation. The shells proved completely ineffective. American aircraft simply flew through the explosions untouched. At 12:37, the first wave attacked. Dive bombers descended through the clouds, pulling up at the last moment to release their bombs. Torpedo bombers approached at wave-top height from multiple directions. Fighter bombers strafed the decks with machine guns and cannon, killing exposed anti-aircraft crews. The noise was overwhelming. Yamato's 162 anti-aircraft guns fired continuously. The roar of main battery guns firing anti-aircraft shells mixed with the crack of bombs exploding. The scream of diving aircraft and the shouts of damage control parties. At 12:41, 2 bombs struck Yamato's upper deck, destroying 2 triple 25mm anti-aircraft mounts and killing their crews. The bombs blew holes in the deck but did not penetrate to vital spaces below. At 12:45, a torpedo struck Yamato far forward on the port side. The underwater explosion sent shock waves through the entire ship. Flooding began in forward compartments, but watertight doors held and the damage was contained. 2 more bombs struck near the aft centerline turret at 12:46. One bomb landed directly on top of the turret, penetrating the armored roof and exploding inside. The explosion killed almost the entire turret crew. Only 1 man survived. 2 or 3 torpedoes hit Yamato between 12:48 and 12:50. Confirmed hits struck near the portside engine room and boiler room. Flooding increased dramatically. Counter-flooding was initiated on the starboard side to correct the developing list to port. The first wave attack lasted approximately 18 minutes. As American aircraft withdrew, damage assessment teams reported to Captain Aruga. Yamato had been hit by at least 5 torpedoes and 4 bombs. Flooding was significant but controlled. The ship still made 20 knots. Anti-aircraft armament was reduced but functional. The assessment changed dramatically at 1302 when radar detected the second wave approaching. This wave consisted of 50 aircraft from USS Essex and USS Bataan. At 1322, an Essex F-4U Corsair hit Yamato with a 1,000-pounds bomb on the port bow. Helldivers followed, scoring additional hits in the bridge area. 5 Helldivers were damaged by anti-aircraft fire, demonstrating that Yamato's defenses remained dangerous. Between 1325 and 1330, 3 or 4 torpedoes struck Yamato on the port side amidships. All torpedo bombers had been ordered to attack only the port side to speed the battleship's capsize. This concentration of damage proved devastatingly effective. Flooding accelerated dramatically in the portside boiler rooms and engine spaces. The list to port increased past 10 degrees. Counter-flooding on the starboard side corrected the list temporarily, but the Damage Control Center reported that the starboard outer engine room would have to be flooded to prevent capsizing. Captain Aruga made the agonizing decision to flood the starboard engine room. This action would save the ship temporarily by correcting the list, but it would also doom 300 men working in that space. There was no time to evacuate them. The valves were opened and cedar rushed in, drowning 300 sailors at their posts. At 1333, the third wave arrived. 110 aircraft from USS Yorktown, USS Intrepid, and USS Langley commenced attacks. Yamato was already severely damaged, listing and slowing. She had become an easier target. Aviators describe her as turning in great slow circles, trailing oil, burning in multiple locations, but still firing every anti-aircraft gun that would bear. Between 1333 and 1402, Yamato was struck by at least 4 more torpedoes and several additional bombs. Fires burned throughout the superstructure. Flooding was out of control. The list to port increased steadily despite desperate counter-flooding efforts. The ship slowed to 10 knots, then to 5 knots. Steering control was lost. At 1402, Captain Aruga received the report from his executive officer that damage control officers were dead and counter-flooding could no longer correct the list. The ship was doomed. Aruga ordered all remaining crew to abandon ship. Vice Admiral Ito sent a final signal by flag hoist, cancelling the operation and ordering the remaining ships to withdraw to Japan. Yamato's radios had been destroyed, making signal flags the only means of communication. Ito retired to his cabin. He would not be among the survivors. Captain Aruga tied himself to the binnacle on the bridge. He also chose to go down with his ship. At 1407, another torpedo struck Yamato's starboard side. At 1417, the 8th and 9th torpedoes hit the port side. The uncorrected list passed 15 degrees. Alarms warned of critical temperatures in the forward main battery magazines. The pumps to flood the magazines were not working. Ammunition began cooking off. At 1420, Yamato capsized completely to port. Over 2,000 men were still aboard. Many trapped below decks in flooded compartments. As the battleship rolled past 90 degrees, water rushed into the funnel uptakes and flooded the boiler rooms. The sudden influx of seawater onto superheated boilers created a massive steam explosion. Simultaneously, the uncontrolled fires in the forward magazine reached the main powder charges. At 1423, Yamato exploded. The detonation of hundreds of tons of propellant and ammunition created an explosion visible and audible over 100 m away. A mushroom cloud rose 20,000 feet into the air. The blast wave was so powerful that several American aircraft flying overhead were damaged. Yamato broke into 2 main sections and sank in 340 m of water, approximately 200 miles northwest of Okinawa. Of 3,332 crew members, only 276 survived. The American aircraft had attacked for 1 hour and 46 minutes. Yamato had been hit by an estimated 11 to 13 torpedoes and 6 to 15 bombs. American losses were 10 aircraft and 12 crew members. The disparity was staggering. The light cruiser Yahagi and 4 destroyers were also sunk. The remaining 4 destroyers rescued what survivors they could and withdrew to Japan. The Battle of the East China Sea demonstrated the absolute supremacy of carrier aviation over surface warships. The destruction of Yamato sent shock waves through Japan. For the first time, the government admitted that Japan's greatest battleship had been sunk. The announcement described Yamato's mission in heroic terms, claiming the ship had fought valiantly against overwhelming odds to defend Okinawa. The reality was bleaker. Yamato had accomplished nothing except adding 3,000 names to the casualty lists. She sank no American ships. She prevented no landings. She did not even reach visual range of Okinawa. For the United States Navy, Yamato's destruction confirmed the complete transformation of naval warfare. Aircraft carriers were now the capital ships of all naval forces. The lessons learned from sinking Yamato influenced American naval planning for decades. Concentrated air attack could destroy any surface target. Coordination between multiple carrier groups multiplied effectiveness. Focusing torpedo attacks on one side of a ship accelerated capsize. Survivors of Yamato carried memories of the battle for the rest of their lives. Inen Mitsuru Yoshida, the radar officer who had written in his journal before the battle, survived the sinking. He spent hours in the oil-covered water before being rescued by a destroyer. After the war, he wrote Requiem for Battleship Yamato, a detailed account of the ship's final voyage. His book became a bestseller in Japan and remains the most detailed first-hand account of the battle. Yoshida described the psychological impact of serving aboard a ship everyone knew was doomed. The crew understood they were sailing to certain death. Yet, discipline never broke. Men went to their posts, performed their duties, and died without panic. American commanders studied the battle extensively. The after-action reports from Task Force 58 analyzed every aspect of the engagement. Torpedoes were far more effective than bombs against heavily armored warships. Yamato's armor had shrugged off most bomb hits, but torpedoes struck below the armor belt where the hull was more vulnerable. Concentrated attacks on one side of the ship caused uncontrollable flooding and rapid capsize. Coordination between dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighters maximized effectiveness. Dive bombers and fighters suppressed anti-aircraft fire, allowing torpedo bombers to make their attacks with fewer losses. The sheer number of aircraft overwhelmed Japanese defenses. Yamato's anti-aircraft guns shot down only 10 American aircraft despite firing thousands of shells. The strategic implications of Yamato's destruction extended beyond the immediate tactical lessons. Japan's decision to expend her greatest battleship in a suicide mission reflected the desperation of Japan's strategic position in April 1945. No rational military calculation suggested Operation Tenjio would succeed. The mission was ordered for psychological and political reasons, not military ones. American planners understood this mentality and feared it. If Japan was willing to expend 3,000 sailors in a hopeless battleship sortie, how many lives would be lost in an invasion of the Japanese home islands? The Battle of Okinawa, still raging when Yamato was sunk, demonstrated Japanese willingness to fight to annihilation. Over 100,000 Japanese soldiers and civilians died defending Okinawa. After the war, Yamato became a powerful symbol in Japanese culture. The battleship represented both the technical excellence of Japanese engineering and the tragic futility of Japan's war effort. The 1974 anime series Space Battleship Yamato reimagined the sunken battleship being raised and converted into a spacecraft to save Earth from alien invasion. The series became hugely popular, establishing a template for space opera anime. The 2005 film Yamato told the story of the battleship's final voyage from multiple crew members' perspectives. The film earned over 5 billion yen at the box office. The Yamato Museum opened in Kure in 2005, 60 years after the battleship sinking. The museum features a massive 1:10 scale model of Yamato along with artifacts, photographs, and detailed exhibits about the ship's construction and service. The museum attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. Several expeditions have located and photographed Yamato's wreck. The battleship rests in two main sections on the seafloor approximately 340 m below the surface. Japanese law protects the wreck as a war grave, prohibiting salvage or disturbance. The 3,000 men who died aboard Yamato remain with their ship. The historical assessment of Yamato's value remains contentious. Some argue that she was a magnificent achievement of naval architecture, the culmination of battleship development. Others contend that Yamato represented a colossal waste of resources, a dinosaur completed just as the age of dinosaurs ended. Both perspectives contain truth. Yamato was superbly engineered and built. She incorporated revolutionary design features and represented the absolute peak of battleship construction. But she was also strategically obsolete before she was completed. The resources consumed by building Yamato and her sister Musashi were staggering. The steel used in both ships could have built approximately 45 destroyers or 6 large aircraft carriers. Japan desperately needed both throughout the war. The fuel oil consumed by Yamato during her brief career could have powered dozens of smaller warships on actual combat missions. The 3,000 crew members who died on April 7, 1945 represented invaluable trained naval personnel. From a strategic perspective, Yamato consumed enormous resources and achieved minimal results. Yet, there is something undeniably impressive about Yamato's existence. She represented the limit of what was physically possible in battleship construction. Her guns remain the largest ever mounted on a warship. Her armor remains the thickest ever fitted to any vessel. Her displacement remains the record for battleships, a record that will never be broken because no nation will ever build battleships again. In this sense, Yamato achieved immortality not through combat effectiveness, but through being the definitive final statement of an entire class of warship. The American pilots who sank Yamato understood they were making history. They had destroyed the heaviest battleship ever built. Yet for most of them, it was just another mission in a long war. Several pilots wrote letters home mentioning the battle, describing the size of the battleship and the intensity of the anti-aircraft fire, but there was little celebration. By April 1945, American naval aviators were professionals conducting a job. Sinking Yamato was satisfying, but not surprising. They had the training, the experience, the aircraft, and the numbers to destroy any ship afloat. This contrast between American professionalism and Japanese sacrifice characterized the Pacific War's final year. American forces approached combat with overwhelming material superiority and systematic tactical planning. Japanese forces lacking resources and viable strategy resorted to suicidal attacks intended to inflict maximum psychological impact while achieving minimal tactical results. Yamato's suicide mission fit this pattern perfectly. The mission was never expected to succeed militarily, but spirit without strategy is waste. Yamato's 3,000 dead did not slow the American advance by a single day. Okinawa fell. American aircraft began bombing the Japanese home islands with impunity. 4 months after Yamato sank, Japan surrendered unconditionally. The final irony of Yamato's story is that she was sunk while trying to accomplish exactly what American forces wanted. The mission to Okinawa drew Yamato into open water where American carrier aircraft could destroy her. If Yamato had remained in port, she would have posed a threat during any invasion of Japan. Destroying her at anchor would have been difficult. But Japan's leadership chose to expend the battleship in a gesture rather than conserve her for actual defense. American commanders could hardly believe their fortune when intelligence confirmed Operation Tango. Task Force 58 obliged by destroying her completely. Today, Yamato rests on the seafloor of the East China Sea, a tomb for 3,000 men and a monument to the end of the battleship era. She never fought the decisive surface engagement Japanese planners envisioned. She never justified the enormous resources invested in her construction. Yet she endures in memory because she represented the absolute limit of what human engineering could achieve within the constraints of battleship design. Japanese admirals boasted that Yamato was unsinkable, the greatest battleship ever built, invincible in surface combat. They were right about her being the most powerful battleship, but unsinkable. Nearly 400 American aircraft and less than 2 hours of combat proved that claim catastrophically wrong. Yamato sank because the nature of naval warfare had fundamentally changed. No battleship, however powerful, could survive in an environment where the enemy commanded the air. The age of the battleship died with Yamato on April 7, 1945. What replaced it was the age of the aircraft carrier.